Hey you guys! Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit subscribe, especially if you love those unsettling, almost too real stories that make you question what's real and what's manipulation. Alright, let's set the scene. It's Vienna, Austria, in the mid-1990s. Forget the Vienna of grand palaces and classical music for a second. Instead, picture the Donaustadt district. It's a working-class neighborhood, concrete apartment blocks, the kind of place where life is, well, normal. And in one of these apartments lives a 10-year-old girl named Natascha Kampusch. Now, if you were to look at her life from the outside, it probably wouldn't seem all that remarkable. She was born in February of 1988, making her a classic late 80s kid. But normal is a tricky word, isn't it? Her family life was already a bit fractured. Her parents, Brigitte and Ludwig, had split up. It happens, right? A tale as old as time. Natascha lived with her mom, but the whole situation left her feeling a bit adrift. You know that feeling as a kid when you feel like you're on the outside looking in? That was kind of her default setting. She described herself as a lonely child, a bit of a loner who often felt like a latchkey kid, coming home to an empty apartment. She had 2 older half-sisters, but with the age gap and the family dynamics, she was largely left to her own devices. She wasn't the bubbly, popular kid holding court in the schoolyard. She was more likely the quiet one in the corner, lost in her own world, maybe a little more mature than her years because she had to be. This wasn't a life of overt tragedy, not yet anyway. It was just quiet, a little gray, the kind of childhood that thousands of kids have, navigating the choppy waters of their parents' separation and trying to find their own place in the world. It's the kind of unremarkable backdrop that makes what happens next so utterly, bone-chillingly unbelievable. So, fast forward to March 2nd, 1998. It's a Monday morning, the start of a new school week. And like a lot of Monday mornings in a lot of households, this one begins with a bit of friction. There's an argument. It's one of those completely insignificant yet all-consuming mother-daughter spats that you have when you're 10, the kind of thing you can't even remember a week later. But this argument, this one would be remembered. It would be dissected, analyzed, and replayed in her mother's mind for years, colored by the horrifying lens of guilt. After the spat, Natascha is fuming. She's 10, she's indignant, and she makes a decision. She storms out of the house without the customary goodbye kiss, a small act of rebellion. But here's the kicker, the detail that's just gut-wrenching in retrospect. This was the very first day her mother had given her permission to walk to school all by herself. Think about that, a milestone, a little taste of independence she had probably begged for. For her mom, it was a moment of letting go, of trusting that her daughter was growing up. For Natascha, it was a victory, a step into a bigger world. She grabs her backpack, a distinctive red and pink one, and heads out the door, still smarting from the argument, but probably also buzzing with the thrill of her newfound freedom. The cool morning air, the familiar streets, but this time, she's navigating them alone. It's a moment poised right on the edge of a normal life. The last one she would have for a very, very long time. You can almost feel the rhythm of her steps on the pavement. The familiar path to school. Past this corner, across that street. It's a journey she's made countless times, but always with her mom. Today is different. She's alone, in charge. Maybe the anger from the morning's argument is starting to fade, replaced by that quiet pride of being a big kid. And then she sees it, a white minivan, parked, just there. Now you have to remember, this is 1998. The whole stranger danger conversation is at its peak. Kids are taught to be wary, but a parked van? It's not necessarily a red flag. It's just part of the urban landscape. She probably glances at it and keeps walking, but something makes her look again. Maybe it's the stillness of it, the way it seems to be waiting. The man inside, Wolfgang Přiklopil, is a communications technician, a guy with a job, a house, a seemingly normal life. To the outside world, he's nobody special, but inside, he's a monster who has been planning, fantasizing, and now his fantasy is walking right towards him. As Natascha draws level with the van, the side door slides open. It's a sound that will echo in her nightmares. Before she can process what's happening, before she can scream, he's on her. A hand clamps over her mouth. An arm snakes around her waist, lifting her off her feet. It's brutally quick. One moment, she's a 10-year-old girl walking to school. The next, she is airborne, being bundled into the dark, cavernous space of the van. The door slides shut, plunging her into darkness and muffling the sounds of the outside world. The engine starts, and just like that, Natascha Kampusch vanishes from the face of the earth. Inside the van, it's terrifying chaos. Natascha is wrapped in a blanket, her small body trembling. The man, this stranger, tells her not to worry, that she won't be hurt if she behaves. It's the classic, chilling script of an abductor. He tells her he's not going to ask for a ransom because her parents don't have enough money. Get this, he actually did his homework. He knew she came from a working-class family. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a meticulously planned operation. He drives for what feels like an eternity, about 2 hours, ending up in the town of Straßhof an der Nordbahn, a quiet village just outside Vienna. He pulls into the garage of a neat, respectable-looking house, the kind of house you'd walk past 1,000 times and never give a second thought. For Natascha, this is the end of the world as she knows it. He leads her from the garage, through the house, and down into the basement. And there, hidden beneath the floor, is her new reality, a secret, windowless cell. It's tiny, less than 5 square meters. It's a dungeon, purpose-built for this exact moment. The sound of the heavy, soundproof door closing for the first time is the sound of her childhood ending. The sound of a lock turning is the sound of 3,096 days of captivity beginning. She is 10 years old, alone in the dark, miles from home, with a man whose intentions are a terrifying unknown. The hope of a quick rescue, of her mom finding her, must have been a burning ember in her chest, an ember that would be forced to glow in the dark for a very, very long time. Meanwhile, back in the world above ground, the clock is ticking. At school, Natascha's seat is empty. Teachers do the roll call, and her name hangs in the air, unanswered. At first, it's not a panic. Maybe she's sick. Maybe her mom forgot to call the school. But as the hours pass, a knot of unease begins to tighten. The school calls her mother, Brigitte. Is Natascha homesick today? And with that simple question, Brigitte's world shatters. The morning's argument, Natascha storming out, it all comes rushing back, laced with a new, horrifying significance. She calls friends, she calls her ex-husband, Ludwig. No one has seen her. Panic sets in. The police are called, and what begins as a missing person report quickly escalates. This isn't a case of a kid who missed the bus. Something is wrong. The search begins immediately, a massive operation. Police fan out across Vienna, helicopters buzz overhead, and Natascha's face, a smiling school picture, is suddenly everywhere. On lampposts, in shop windows, on the nightly news. Her story becomes a national obsession, and then a breakthrough, or what seems like one. A 12-year-old schoolmate comes forward. She says she saw it. She saw Natascha being dragged into a white minivan by a man. This is it, right? The key piece of evidence. But here's where things get frustrating. The witness's account is a little muddled. She's a kid, she's scared, and her description of the man in the van is inconsistent. The police, swamped with leads and sightings, kind of put her testimony on a back burner. They investigate hundreds of white vans, including, and you won't believe this, Wolfgang Přiklopil's. They even question him. He gives them a plausible alibi, something about using the van to move rubble from his home construction. He seems normal, unremarkable, and they let him go. They were so close. They were right there. But the monster was hiding in plain sight, and the trail went cold, leaving a family in agony and a nation holding its breath. So, the trail goes cold. And you know what happens when a trail goes cold in the public eye? The world, in its relentless, forward-marching way, moves on. The missing posters with Natascha's face start to curl and fade in the rain. The news cycle, always hungry for the next big story, finds something else to obsess over. The national conversation shifts. For a while, she was the little girl everyone in Austria was looking for. Now, her name becomes a tragic footnote, a cautionary tale whispered by parents to their children. But for her family, time doesn't move on, it fractures. It stops dead on March 2nd, 1998, and every day after is just a painful echo of that morning. Her mother, Brigitte, is trapped in a special kind of hell. Imagine the guilt, the what-ifs. What if they hadn't argued? What if she hadn't let her walk to school alone? The media, in their typical gracious fashion, don't help. Theories start to fly, some even pointing the finger at the family. It's the kind of cruel speculation that victims' families so often endure. Her father, Ludwig, spends his life savings hiring private investigators, chasing down phantom leads in other countries, clinging to any shred of hope, no matter how flimsy. The family unit, already fragile, completely shatters under the unbearable weight of not knowing. The outside world might be forgetting, but in a few homes, the wound is still raw, gaping, and infected with the poison of uncertainty. And all the while, just a few miles away, the answer to all their prayers and nightmares is locked in a basement, listening to the hum of a ventilation fan. Let's talk about this cell. Because it wasn't just a room, it was a masterpiece of malevolent engineering. Přiklopil, the communications technician, had poured all of his twisted diligence into its construction. This wasn't some hastily boarded-up corner of a basement. Oh no, this was purpose-built. It was tiny, about 54 square feet. To give you some perspective, that's smaller than a standard parking space. It had no windows, of course. No natural light ever touched its concrete walls. The door wasn't just a door, it was a multi-layered fortress. A small steel outer door, then a concrete-filled inner door that weighed over 300 pounds. It was soundproofed, ensuring that no scream, no cry for help would ever penetrate the floorboards of the house above. This wasn't just about keeping her in, it was about erasing her from the world. Inside this concrete box, there was a toilet, a small sink, a bed, and a single table. The only connection to the outside world, if you can even call it that, was a ventilation fan that hummed constantly, a monotonous soundtrack to her confinement, and an intercom system. This intercom was his lifeline to her, his tool of control. It was how he spoke to her, gave orders, and listened. He was the voice from the heavens, the unseen god of her tiny, suffocating universe. He controlled the light, the air, the sound. Every single aspect of her physical existence was now mediated through his technology. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? Being trapped not just by walls, but by a system designed by your captor to make him all-powerful. In these first days and weeks, Přiklopil establishes the rules of his new kingdom. He is the master, the provider, the absolute authority. He refers to himself as her creator. Yeah, let that sink in. The sheer, unadulterated megalomania. He's not just her captor. In his mind, he has created this new version of her. He even tries to rename her, to strip away the last vestiges of her old identity. But Natascha, even at 10 years old, has a core of steel. She refuses. She insists, "I am Natascha." It's her first real act of defiance in this new world, a small but powerful declaration that he can imprison her body, but not herself. Her days fall into a grim routine dictated entirely by him. He brings her food, books, and sometimes a small radio. But these aren't gifts, they're tools of control. Good behavior might be rewarded with a book. Bad behavior means the light goes off or the radio is taken away. He's conditioning her like a lab animal. He demands absolute obedience and cleanliness. He is, by all accounts, pathologically neat and tidy, and he imposes this obsession on her. Her tiny cell had to be immaculate. It's a classic tactic of abusers. Control the environment, control the person. He would talk to her for hours over the intercom, not as a friend, but as a lecturer, a programmer. He was downloading his worldview into her, shaping her reality, trying to make her see him as her savior, the one who took her away from a supposedly uncaring family. It's a slow, insidious process of psychological erosion, designed to break her down and rebuild her in his own image. So what do you do when you're 10 years old and your entire world shrinks to the size of a bathroom? You fight back. Not with your fists, that's impossible, but with your mind. Natascha's resilience is, frankly, astounding. She understood, with an intuition far beyond her years, that her sanity was the one thing he couldn't physically lock up. So she started to build a world inside her head. She would create routines for herself. She'd play school, imagining her teachers and classmates. She'd talk to herself, having full-blown conversations to keep her voice and her social skills from atrophying. She would use the few items she had to create games. A bottle cap could become a character in a story. The pattern of the concrete on the wall could become a map of a fantasy land. It's the kind of creative survival instinct that is just awe-inspiring. She read every single thing he gave her, from children's books to the labels on food packaging, over and over again, not just for distraction, but to keep her brain sharp. She knew that if her mind turned to mush, he would win. She also clung to the hope of escape. She would fantasize about it, plan it out in her head. She would listen to the sounds from the house above, trying to piece together his routine, looking for any weakness, any opportunity. This internal world wasn't just a coping mechanism, it was a training ground. It was her private rebellion, a silent screw you to the man who thought he controlled everything. While he was trying to erase Natascha Kampusch, she was secretly, stubbornly, keeping herself alive. The first 6 months were the purest form of this hell. Total isolation. For half a year, she never left that room. 6 months without seeing the sun, without feeling a breeze, without seeing another human face, except for the rare, terrifying moments he might open the door. Think about that. 180 days. For the first 2 months, he forced her to stay in bed all day. He would only allow her to get up to use the toilet. It was a strategy to induce learned helplessness, to make her body as weak as he wanted her mind to be. The only thing that punctuated the crushing monotony was the radio. He would let her listen to it, and through it, she got tiny, distorted glimpses of the world she'd lost. She would hear about movies she'd never see, songs that were popular in a world that no longer included her. She even heard news reports about her own disappearance, a truly surreal and torturous experience. It was a constant reminder of everything that had been stolen from her. After those first 6 months of absolute solitary confinement, he began to allow her out of the cell for brief, controlled periods. First, just to wash. Then, eventually, to help him with chores in the house. But this wasn't an act of kindness. It was the next phase of his plan. He had broken her in, and now he was going to integrate her into his bizarre, solitary life, turning her from a prisoner into a slave. The cellar was no longer just her prison. It was becoming her home base in a larger, but no less terrifying prison. The house itself. So, stepping out of that cellar for the first time in 6 months must have been like being born into a world you already knew you hated. Imagine the sensory assault. After half a year of near-total darkness, the ordinary light from a 60-watt bulb would feel like a solar flare. The air, not recycled through a humming fan, would carry 1,000 smells your brain had forgotten how to process. But this wasn't a release into freedom. Oh, not at all. This was just an expansion of the prison. The house itself was Přiklopil's temple of obsessive control. Everything was pathologically neat, sterile, and silent. There were no cozy family photos on the walls, no charming clutter on the shelves. It was the home of a man who lived entirely inside his own head, and it was just as cold and empty as you'd expect. For Natascha, this new upstairs world came with a whole new set of rules. She was now his domestic servant. Her chores were endless: cooking, cleaning, dusting. And he watched her, constantly. There was no privacy. In the cellar, she had been alone. Up here, she was under his perpetual, unnerving gaze. Every move was scrutinized, every task judged. A speck of dust missed on a windowsill could trigger a tirade of abuse, or worse, banishment back to the dark. This wasn't a longer leash. It was a different kind of chain. The physical walls of the cell were replaced by the invisible walls of his paranoia and constant surveillance. She could now see windows, see the tantalizing slivers of the outside world, a passing car, a bird on a wire. But they were just dioramas of a life she couldn't have, reminders of how close, and yet impossibly far, freedom really was. With her old life and school a distant memory, Přiklopil took on a new role: teacher. And let me tell you, his curriculum was something else. This wasn't about giving her a well-rounded education. It was about control, filtered through the pages of a book. He would bring her textbooks, newspapers, and videotapes he recorded from television. He was her sole source of information, the gatekeeper of her knowledge. He could edit reality. Think about the power in that. He could shape her entire understanding of the world that was changing so rapidly without her. He taught her reading, writing, and math, but it was all on his terms. Lessons would be held at the kitchen table, a bizarre parody of homeschooling. He, the man who stole her future, was now painstakingly teaching her about the past tense. The irony is just staggering, isn't it? He saw himself as her educator, her mentor, the one shaping her young mind. But Natascha, ever the survivor, turned his weapon into her shield. She devoured every piece of information she could get. She wasn't just passively receiving his lessons, she was actively learning, exercising her brain, keeping it sharp and agile. She knew that a dull mind was a conquered mind. This education became another battleground. For him, it was about creating a compliant companion who thought like him. For her, it was about secretly forging the intellectual tools she would need to one day, somehow, break free. She was learning his world to find a way out of it. Now, we have to talk about the darker side of this education. Because alongside the books and lessons came a relentless campaign of physical and psychological abuse. This wasn't just about keeping her locked up. It was about systematically breaking her spirit. The violence was unpredictable and brutal. He would beat her for the smallest perceived infraction, a poorly done chore, a moment of defiance. He used starvation as a weapon, withholding food to make her weak and compliant, sometimes for days on end. It was a visceral, constant reminder of her total dependence on him for her very survival. And then, there was the psychological warfare. He would shave her head, an act designed to strip her of her identity, her femininity, to make her feel less than human. It's a classic tactic you see in concentration camps and cults. Erase the individual, make them anonymous, make them yours. He would constantly tell her that her parents had forgotten her, that they were happy she was gone, that they hadn't even paid a ransom for her, a ransom he never asked for. He was trying to sever every last emotional tie to her past, to make himself the only person in her universe. He was her tormentor and, by his own twisted logic, her only protector. This cocktail of violence, starvation, and psychological manipulation is designed to create a state of complete submission. But for every time he tried to break her, a small, resilient part of her just held on tighter, cataloging every injustice, fueling a quiet, burning rage that would serve as her lifeline. And so the days bleed into weeks, the weeks into months, and the months into years. 10 years old becomes 11. 11 becomes 12. She goes through puberty in captivity. Think about that. All the confusing, awkward, and intensely private changes of adolescence are experienced under the watchful eye of her captor. He is the only human being she interacts with. He is the one who has to buy her sanitary products. He is the one who witnesses her changing from a little girl into a young woman. The horror and violation of that is almost impossible to comprehend. Her world is static, but her body is betraying her by growing up, by moving forward in time when her life is stuck on pause. The bond between them becomes this unbelievably complex, toxic knot. It's often mislabeled as Stockholm Syndrome, but it's more complicated than that. It's a traumatic bonding. When one person has absolute power over another, power over their food, their pain, their very breath, a deep, twisted dependency is formed. He is the source of all her suffering, but also the source of everything she needs to live. A kind word from him, a decent meal, is a monumental event. It's a survival strategy. To survive, you have to find the humanity in the monster, even if you have to invent it. You have to adapt. For 8.5 years, this man was her entire world, a world of abuse, control, and bizarre, forced domesticity. She was growing up, and her childhood was being ground into dust with each passing day. And here's the part that really messes with your head. Wolfgang Přiklopil wasn't some goblin who never left his cave. He lived a double life with chilling efficiency. To the outside world, he was just a slightly odd, solitary guy. A bit of a loner, sure, but harmless. He had a mother whom he would visit. He had neighbors who would see him coming and going, mowing his lawn, taking out the trash. He was hiding the world's biggest secret, and he was doing it behind a facade of absolute banality. The house was his fortress. No one was ever invited inside. Not friends, not family. No one. He couldn't risk it. His paranoia was his security system. Can you imagine the sheer, nerve-shredding audacity of it all? Leaving the house to go buy groceries, knowing there is a human being locked in your basement. Talking to his mother on the phone while the girl he stole is forced to clean his bathroom. It speaks to a level of compartmentalization that is truly psychotic. He had successfully split his world in two. The public face of Wolfgang, the quiet technician, and the private god king of his basement kingdom. And for years, nobody suspected a thing. Nobody looked at the neat house with the tidy garden and thought, "House of Horrors." It's the ultimate trump card of the monster next door. They rely on our assumption of normalcy. They count on us to believe that the things that happen in movies don't happen in our quiet little suburban streets. But sometimes, they do. But here's the thing about a perfect, hermetically sealed system. It's boring, and megalomaniacs get bored. After years of this grim routine, him playing the God King, her playing the perfect prisoner slave, a strange thing started to happen. Přiklopil got comfortable. He got arrogant. The fear of being caught, which had made him so meticulous and paranoid, began to fade, replaced by a sense of invincibility. He'd gotten away with it for years, right? He was smarter than everyone. So, he decided to change the game. He wanted more. It wasn't enough to have a slave in the basement. He started to want a companion for his bizarre life in the world above. He wanted to show her off, in a way. Not as Natascha Kampusch, the missing girl, but as his creation. this obedient, pale creature who lived only for him. So, he started taking her out. At first, it was just short trips in the car at night. Imagine that. After years of seeing nothing but concrete walls and the sterile rooms of his house, you're suddenly in a moving vehicle, watching the world streak by as a blur of lights. But every second of this freedom was laced with terror. He had rules. Oh, you better believe he had rules. She was to sit perfectly still. She was not to look at anyone. If they were stopped, she had a script to follow. And always, the threat of what he would do to her, or worse, to the person who tried to help, if she deviated even slightly. It was a terrifying new chapter. The prison was no longer static. It was mobile. And then came the ski trip. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's so audacious, so utterly insane, it sounds like a pitch for a dark comedy. After keeping her locked away from the sun for years, turning her into a pale, cellar-dwelling creature, he decides to take her skiing, to a mountain resort teeming with people, sunlight, and fresh air. The sheer cognitive dissonance is mind-blowing. He buys her ski clothes, but of course, they're baggy and unflattering, designed to hide her thin frame. He makes her wear sunglasses and a hat at all times, not for the sun, but to obscure her face. So you have this girl, who is probably severely vitamin D deficient, blinking in the blinding white snow, surrounded by happy families and vacationing couples. She later said the fresh air and the exertion made her feel dizzy and sick. Her body wasn't used to it, and all the while, he's right there, a constant shadow, whispering threats, reminding her that one wrong move, one glance held for too long at a stranger, and he would kill her right there on the slopes. He even bragged to her that he was an expert marksman. It's the ultimate power trip. He's not just hiding her in plain sight. He's parading her around in one of the most open, public spaces imaginable, confident that no one will see the monster and his victim, only a man and his sullen, awkward daughter. During this ski trip, there were moments, tiny, flickering moments of opportunity that must have been agonizing. At one point, she was in a public restroom in the ski lodge. For a few seconds, she was alone, surrounded by other women. The thought screamed through her head. Scream! Tell them! Do it now! But then the calculation begins, the rapid-fire risk assessment that had become second nature to her. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm just a hysterical teenager? And what will he do when he finds me? He had told her explicitly that he had booby-trapped the house. If she ever escaped, he would kill himself and take anyone who helped her with him. He had planted this terrifying idea in her head that any attempt to save herself would result in a bloodbath. So she stands there in a brightly lit bathroom that smells of pine cleaner, her heart hammering against her ribs, and she does nothing. She washes her hands and walks back out to him. Can you even fathom the strength it takes to make that choice? To swallow that scream? It's not weakness. It's a strategic retreat. It's the chilling calculus of survival. Every person she saw was a potential savior, but also a potential victim. Her desire for freedom was constantly at war with the responsibility she felt for the safety of these innocent strangers. He had shackled her, not just with locks and threats, but with a twisted sense of guilt. The ski trip wasn't a one-off. It was the beginning of a new phase. As his confidence swelled, these outings became more frequent. He'd take her to a DIY store to help him carry building supplies for whatever twisted project he was working on. He'd take her to his mother's house, introducing her as a helper. Think about that. He brought the evidence of his crime to meet his own mom, the sheer pathological nerve. Each trip was a masterclass in psychological torture for Natascha. She had to perform. She had to be the quiet, subservient girl, never making eye contact, never drawing attention. She became an expert actor in the long-running tragedy of her own life. She had to navigate the mundane world, the checkout lines, the parking lots, the polite nods to strangers, while screaming on the inside. Every interaction was a potential lifeline she couldn't grab. People saw them, of course. A shopkeeper probably saw a man with his quiet daughter. His own mother saw her son with a shy young woman who helped him around the house. No one saw the truth because the truth was too monstrous to contemplate. We, as a society, are conditioned to see the normal. We fill in the blanks with the most plausible story. And the most plausible story is never, that man is a kidnapper and that girl has been his prisoner for nearly a decade. The horror was hiding behind a veil of utter banality. But here's the beautiful, terrible irony of it all. In his arrogance, Přiklopil was making a fatal mistake. For 8 years, he had controlled every single calorie, every photon of light, every bit of information that entered her world. He had created a perfectly closed system. But by taking her outside, he was introducing variables. He was letting the real world leak in. Each trip, however terrifying, was a dose of reality. She saw cars, she saw fashion, she heard snippets of conversation. She was recalibrating, reconnecting. Her mind, which had been surviving on fantasy and memory, was now getting fresh data. She was learning the layout of the town. She was observing how people interacted. She was seeing with her own eyes that the world had not ended. It had gone on without her, and it was waiting for her. These trips were meant to be a demonstration of his absolute power, to show her that even in public, she was his. But what they really did was demystify the outside world. It was no longer a scary, unknown place. It was real. It was tangible. And with every trip to the hardware store, with every drive through the town, the ember of hope that she had so carefully guarded in the darkness of the cellar began to glow a little brighter. He thought he was tightening his grip, but he was actually teaching her how to escape. So, this is the dynamic now. He's the arrogant showman, and she's the star of his one-man horror play. But with every trip outside, with every interaction he allows, the power balance is subtly, seismically shifting. He thinks he's demonstrating his control, but what he's really doing is reawakening the girl he tried to bury in the cellar. She's no longer just surviving moment to moment. She's observing, she's learning, she's planning. The hope that was once a tiny, secret ember is now being fanned into a quiet flame. She's not the terrified 10-year-old anymore. She's 18. She spent more of her conscious life as a prisoner than as a free person, and a deep, cold resolve has settled in her bones. She knows she can't overpower him physically. He's a man, and years of malnutrition have left her frail. So, she has to be smarter. She has to be more patient. She has to wait for the perfect moment, that one fatal mistake that his monumental ego will inevitably lead him to make. The house is no longer just a prison, it's a chessboard. And she's waiting for him to leave his king exposed. It's a terrifying waiting game, because every single day she waits is another day of her life stolen, another day of abuse. But she knows, with a certainty that keeps her sane, that her chance will come. It has to. That day arrives on August 23rd, 2006. It's a Wednesday. It starts like any other of the 395 days before it. A day of chores, of tension, of walking on eggshells. The big task for the day? Cleaning his car. He'd recently bought a red BMW convertible and was planning to sell his other vehicle, a van. He wanted it spotless for the potential buyer. So, there they are, in the garden of the house on Heinestrasse. It's a sunny, ordinary afternoon. The kind of afternoon where neighbors are mowing their lawns or watering their plants. And in the middle of this picture of suburban tranquility, you have this deeply disturbing scene. A young woman, pale and thin, methodically vacuuming a car under the watchful eye of her captor. The vacuum cleaner is roaring. It's a loud, industrial-strength machine, and the noise completely dominates the garden, creating a pocket of sound that isolates them from the rest of the neighborhood. For Přiklopil, it's just noise, an annoyance. For Natascha, that noise is about to become the soundtrack to her freedom. She's just going through the motions, cleaning as she's been ordered, her mind probably a million miles away, waiting, always waiting. And then it happens. The variable. The one thing he can't control. His phone rings. It's the potential buyer for the van, the very reason for the day's chore. Přiklopil answers, annoyed. He tries to talk over the deafening roar of the vacuum cleaner, barking into the phone. He's irritated, distracted. He can't hear properly. So he does the one thing he has trained her, through years of terror, to believe he would never do. He turns his back on her. He walks away, just a few steps, maybe 10 or 15 feet, moving towards a quieter part of the garden to carry on his conversation. It's a tiny lapse in his otherwise total vigilance. For 8.5 years, he has been her shadow, a constant, oppressive presence. But now, for the first time, there is space between them. And there is noise, a beautiful, glorious wall of sound from the vacuum, covering any noise she might make. This is it. This is the mistake. This is the king, distracted by a business call, leaving himself wide open. The moment she has been waiting for, hoping for, dreaming of, for 3,096 days has just arrived, unannounced, on a sunny Wednesday afternoon. In that split second, her mind must have been a supernova of thought and terror. This is not a Hollywood movie moment. There's no soaring orchestral score. There is only the roar of the vacuum and the frantic, silent scream in her own head. Now! It has to be now! Every instinct, honed by years of abuse, is probably telling her to stay put, to be the obedient girl, because the punishment for failure is unthinkable. The ghost of every beating, every threat, every moment of starvation is pulling her back. But the 18-year-old woman, the one who secretly read newspapers and memorized the layout of the town, is pushing her forward. She thinks about her future, a future that, until this second, was just an endless expanse of cleaning this man's house until she died. She knows if she doesn't take this chance, she may never get another one. It's a gamble for her life. So, she makes a choice. She doesn't turn the vacuum off. She doesn't make a sound. She just drops the cleaning attachment. She leaves it there, still roaring, a decoy, and she runs. Not a graceful sprint, a desperate, clumsy, heart-in-her-throat scramble for her life. She runs. She bolts through the garden, heading for the gate she knows leads to the street. It's probably a gate she's passed through 100 times on those terrifying trips with him, but this time, she's passing through it alone. She bursts out onto the quiet suburban street, a ghost returning to the world of the living. She doesn't just run down the pavement, she's smarter than that. She knows he'll be in the car in seconds. So she runs through the neighbors' gardens, zigzagging, putting obstacles between herself and the monster she knows is just moments behind her. She's climbing fences, trampling flower beds, her lungs burning, her mind screaming. This isn't just a physical escape. It's a jailbreak from a psychological prison 8.5 years in the making. Every step is a rebellion. Every fence she climbs is a wall of her prison crumbling down. She is a blur of motion and pure, unadulterated will. She runs until she sees people. She runs towards the first sign of life, the first hope of sanctuary. The first person she approaches, a man in his garden, is confused and doesn't help. Undeterred, she keeps going, her desperation giving her a strength she never knew she had. She is no longer a prisoner. She is a fugitive from hell, and she is running towards the light. Then she sees her, an elderly woman standing by her window. Natascha runs to the window, banging on the glass, her voice finally breaking free. "Help me! Please, help me!" The woman, startled, opens the window, and Natascha, breathless, terrified but coherent, says the words that will change everything. She doesn't just ask for help. She gives the woman a name that has been a ghost in the Austrian consciousness for nearly a decade. I am Natascha Kampusch. Imagine hearing that. It would be like a character from a history book knocking on your window. The woman, thank God, understands the gravity of the situation. She lets her in. She brings this trembling, wild-eyed young woman into her kitchen and locks the door. That click of the lock is the most beautiful sound Natascha has heard in 3,096 days. The woman calls the police. "You have to come quickly," she says. "There is a young woman here. She says she is Natascha Kampusch." And just like that, it's over. The running has stopped. She is inside. There is a locked door between her and him. She is safe. After 8.5 years in the dark, Natascha Kampusch has finally stepped back into the light. So, the police arrive. And you have to put yourself in their shoes for a second. They get a call about a distressed young woman who is making a pretty wild claim. The name Natascha Kampusch isn't just a name, it's a piece of Austrian folklore at this point. It's the boogeyman story, the national tragedy that everyone knows, but has long since filed away as unsolved. So when these two officers walk into this quiet suburban kitchen and see this pale, trembling 18-year-old girl wrapped in a blanket, their first thought probably isn't, "Oh my God, it's her." It's more likely, "Okay, what are we dealing with here? Is she delusional? On drugs? A runaway with a flair for the dramatic?" She's speaking in a strange, formal way, like someone who learned to talk from old books in a single, pedantic captor. Which, of course, she did. She's articulate, but socially off. She can't make eye contact. She's terrified of the male officer. Every instinct she has is screaming, "Danger!" They take her to the police station, and the initial interactions are cautious, almost skeptical. They're trying to verify her story, but what's the protocol for when a ghost walks into your office? They ask her questions about her family, her childhood, things only the real Natascha would know, and she answers them perfectly. The details start to line up, and the disbelief in the room begins to slowly, painstakingly curdle into a dawning, electrifying horror. They're starting to realize this isn't a hoax. This is real. While all this is happening, let's rewind a few minutes. Back in the garden, Přiklopil finishes his call. He turns around, probably annoyed, ready to bark another order. And she's gone. The vacuum cleaner is still roaring, a monument to his lapse in concentration. At first, it's probably just irritation. Where did she go? But then a second passes. 2 seconds. The irritation blossoms into cold, sickening dread. He sees the open gate, and he knows. His perfect world, his kingdom of one, his entire life's work of monstrous control has just evaporated in the time it took to discuss the sale of a used van. Panic. Pure, animal panic. He knows the clock is ticking. He knows exactly who she is and what she will tell them. His meticulously constructed double life is about to be blown to smithereens. He doesn't wait. He doesn't search the house. He knows she's gone for good. He gets in his car, the red BMW she was just cleaning, and he flees. He drives aimlessly, frantically. His mind, which was once so ordered and controlled, is now a hurricane of fear and failure. He calls a friend, a business associate, and confesses, not everything, but enough. "I am a kidnapper and a rapist," he says. He tells the friend to sell the house and give the money to Natascha's mother. It's a bizarre, last-ditch attempt at, what? Atonement? It's the final, pathetic act of a man whose fantasy has just collided with reality. Back at the police station, they need proof. Rock-solid, undeniable proof. Eyewitness memory is fallible. Stories can be fabricated. They need science. The first marker is a scar. Natascha tells them about a surgical scar on her body from a childhood operation. The police records confirm it. Check 1. Then they take a DNA sample. This is the moment of truth. Her parents, who have been living in this limbo of grief for 8.5 years, are notified. Not that she's been found, not yet. Just that there's a development, a young woman claiming to be their daughter. They need a comparative sample. You can only imagine the storm of hope and terror that simple request must have triggered. The samples are rushed to the lab. And while the world holds its breath, the lab technicians do their work. The results come back. It's a 100% match. It's her. Natascha Kampusch, the little girl from the faded posters, the ghost who haunted a nation, is alive. The news explodes through the police department, then leaks to the press. It's a bombshell. The story isn't just news. It's a national event, a miracle, a tragedy, and a media circus all rolled into one. The quiet suburban police station is suddenly the epicenter of the biggest news story in the world. While the world is just learning Natascha's name again, Přiklopil's story is coming to its inevitable, pathetic end. He knows there's no escape. The police are now hunting him. His face and name are being broadcast everywhere. His fortress has been breached. His secret is out. He is no longer the god king of his own little world. He's just a pathetic fugitive. His reign is over. So he drives to a train station on the outskirts of Vienna. He parks the car, gets out, and walks to the edge of the tracks. The man who micromanaged every second of another human's life for 3,096 days has run out of time. He waits, and as a commuter train barrels down the tracks, Wolfgang Přiklopil steps in front of it. It's a quick, violent end to a life defined by slow, meticulous cruelty. And in a way, it's his final act of control. He denies the world a trial. He denies his victims, Natascha, her family, the chance to face him in court, to see him held accountable. He takes the coward's way out, leaving behind 1,000 unanswered questions and a legacy of pure evil. The monster erased himself from the board, but the damage he caused would ripple outwards for years to come. With her captor dead and her identity confirmed, there's one last monumental hurdle to cross. The reunion. Her parents, Brigitte and Ludwig, are brought to the police station. How do you even prepare for that moment? For 8.5 years, they have mourned a ghost. They've aged. Their lives have been defined by this loss. And now, they're about to meet a daughter who is a complete stranger. She's not the 10-year-old girl they remember. She's an 18-year-old woman who has survived an unimaginable trauma, shaped by an entirely different world. The reunion is not the tearful, joyous embrace you see in movies. It's awkward. It's strained. It's heartbreakingly tentative. Natascha, who has only known one person for almost a decade, is overwhelmed. Her parents are looking at her, trying to find the little girl they lost in the face of this pale, guarded young woman. She later said, "I saw 2 strangers. They are all victims of the same crime, but they have endured it in different ways, on different planets. This isn't a happy ending that can be tied up with a neat bow. It's the messy, complicated, and painful beginning of a whole new chapter. The long, difficult road of trying to piece a shattered family and a shattered self back together again in the full glare of the world's media." So you'd think that after the police station, after that gut-wrenching, awkward reunion, she'd finally get a moment to breathe, right? A chance to just be, to sit in a quiet room and process the fact that she is free. But you'd be wrong. So wrong. Because Natascha Kampusch didn't escape from one prison into freedom. She escaped from one prison into another, much larger one, with invisible walls and millions of guards. The prison of public fascination. The moment her identity was confirmed, she ceased to be a person and instantly became a global phenomenon. A living, breathing headline. She's whisked away to a secure location, a hospital, surrounded by a team of psychologists, doctors, and advisors. But outside, the world goes insane. The media descends on Vienna like a biblical plague. We're talking satellite trucks clogging the streets, reporters with telephoto lenses trying to get a shot of her window, helicopters hovering overhead, It's a feeding frenzy. Every detail of her life, her ordeal, is now a commodity to be bought and sold. Offers for exclusive interviews pour in, worth millions. Book deals, movie rights. Her tragedy has become a potential career path before she's even had her first real meal as a free woman. She can't go outside. She can't see the sun she missed for 8 years without it being through the flash of 1,000 cameras. The irony is just brutal. She spent 3,096 days dreaming of the outside world, only to find that the outside world was now a cage. In the middle of this hurricane, her support team, psychologists, lawyers, media advisors, realizes they have to do something. They can't keep her hidden forever. The speculation and rumors are already running wild. The only way to stop the frenzy is to feed the beast, but to do it on their own terms. It's a strategic decision. They will grant one definitive interview. The idea is to create a single, authoritative account of her story that will satisfy the public's insatiable curiosity and, hopefully, get everyone to back off and give her some space. But how do you prepare someone who has just re-entered society for a global press conference? This isn't just about answering questions. It's about surviving the exposure. It's about taking back control of a narrative that has been owned by headlines and police reports for years. Before she even agrees to appear on camera, she takes a tentative first step. She writes an open letter to the public. It's released to the press, a message in a bottle from her new island of fame. In it, she asks for privacy, she thanks people for their concern, and she explains that she needs time. It's a beautifully articulate and poised piece of writing. It's her voice, unfiltered for the first time. It's a test. A way to see how the world reacts to her. The real her, not the myth. It's her first move on this new, terrifyingly public chessboard. Then comes the interview itself, on September 6, 2006, just 2 weeks after her escape. The whole of Austria and much of the world is glued to their screens, and what they see is not what they were expecting. She walks in, poised and self-possessed. She's wearing a patterned headscarf and holds a folder in front of her face, deliberately obscuring parts of herself from the camera. It's an immediate statement. You can see me, but on my terms. I will not be fully consumed by your gaze. Her voice is calm, her language precise and almost academic. There are no hysterical tears, no dramatic breakdown. She is thoughtful. She is analytical. When the interviewer asks her about life in the cellar, she talks about her routines, about fighting boredom, about the education she received from Přiklopil. She speaks about him not as a one-dimensional monster, but as the perpetrator, a term that is clinically accurate but emotionally distant. She describes the complex dynamic, the twisted dependency, the bizarre domesticity of it all. The public had tuned in expecting to see a broken little bird. Instead, they got an eagle. She was not performing the role of the perfect victim. She was presenting herself as a survivor, a thinker, someone who had analyzed her own trauma. And for a lot of people, this was deeply, deeply confusing. And that confusion quickly curdled into something much uglier: suspicion. A backlash began almost immediately. The public, you see, had a script written for her. In that script, she was supposed to be a weeping, grateful, broken mess. She was supposed to rail against the monster who stole her life. But Natascha refused to play the part. Her composure was misinterpreted as coldness. Her intelligence was seen as calculation. Her nuanced description of her captor was twisted into sympathy. And then the conspiracy theories started. Oh boy, did they start. People couldn't reconcile the strong young woman on their screens with the decade-long victim. So, they invented new stories. Maybe she wasn't a victim at all. Maybe she was in on it. Why didn't she escape during that ski trip? Why did she seem to mourn her captor? She had mentioned feeling a kind of grief, which psychologists would call a natural reaction to losing the only human contact you've had for years, a classic symptom of traumatic bonding. But the public called it Stockholm Syndrome, or worse, proof of complicity. It was a second brutal violation. First, her childhood was stolen by one man in private. Now, her story and her credibility were being attacked by millions of strangers in public. She had escaped the cellar only to be put on trial by the entire world. While this public trial by fire is raging, the police are conducting a much more literal investigation at the house on Heinestrasse. They meticulously dismantle Přiklopil's fortress, and every new discovery is leaked to the press, feeding the public's morbid curiosity. They find the cellar, of course, the hidden entrance, the 300-pound concrete-filled door, the ventilation system. It's all there, exactly as she described. It's the cold, hard proof that silences the most insane theories that she was never held captive. But it also becomes this ghoulish tourist attraction. People drive by the house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the real-life house of horrors. And then comes a truly bizarre twist. In a legal settlement, Natascha is awarded ownership of the house, and everyone asks the same question. Why on earth would you want the place where you were tortured for 8.5 years? Her answer is, once again, a masterstroke of control and foresight. She took it, she explained, to protect it. To prevent it from being bought by some ghoul and turned into a twisted theme park or a shrine to her captor. She couldn't bear the thought of that, so she took ownership of the physical heart of her trauma. She has since filled in the cellar and maintains the property, a strange, silent monument to her ordeal that she, and she alone, controls. It was perhaps the ultimate act of turning her prison into her property, of owning her past instead of letting it own her. So now you own the house where you were held captive. Check. You've survived the initial media apocalypse? Check. What's next on the rebuilding a life from scratch to-do list? Well, it turns out the list is terrifyingly long and filled with things most of us learn by osmosis and never think twice about. For Natascha, every single step into a normal life was like walking on the moon. Think about it. She's 18 years old, but she has the life experience of a 10-year-old, filtered through the lens of a deranged psychopath. Simple things become monumental challenges. How do you use a cell phone? How do you count money and pay for something in a shop with a line of impatient people behind you? How do you cross a busy street without having a panic attack? Remember, her captor controlled everything. Now, she's faced with the tyranny of choice. What do you want for breakfast? A simple question that's paralyzing when you've spent years being given whatever you were given, grateful just to eat. She had to learn to drive, a terrifying prospect for someone whose only experience in a car was as a prisoner. She had to finish her education, sitting in classrooms with teenagers who were years younger, but light years ahead in social experience. Every first for her was freighted with the weight of her past. Her first trip to the cinema, her first time in a cafe, these weren't joyful milestones. They were terrifying expeditions into a world that was loud, fast, and unpredictable. She was an adult with the social map of a child, trying to navigate a world that was already judging her every move. And that judgment wasn't just coming from anonymous trolls on the internet. It came from the top. The backlash and conspiracy theories got so loud that the Austrian government was forced to act. They launched not one, but multiple official inquiries into the case. Get this. The police work that had failed to find her for 8 years was now being re-examined, but so was her story. The victim was once again under investigation. A key figure in this was Ludwig Adamovich, a former president of Austria's constitutional court. He headed a special commission and became one of Natascha's most prominent public critics. He openly voiced doubts about her story, suggesting she could have escaped earlier, questioning the lone wolf theory about Přiklopil. He wondered if she was protecting an accomplice or if there was a wider child abuse ring involved. So imagine this. You've survived a decade of hell. You've escaped. You've told your story. And now, one of the most respected legal minds in your country is going on television and basically calling you a liar. It was a state-sanctioned gaslighting campaign. The pressure was immense. The police had to follow every crackpot theory, re-interviewing witnesses, digging into Přiklopil's past, looking for any evidence of a second person. Of course, they found nothing. Every investigation ultimately confirmed her story, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted by the establishment itself, giving legitimacy to the very people who were tormenting her. Faced with this tidal wave of disbelief, what do? You could retreat, hide from the world, and let the theorists win. Or you could do what Natascha did. You write the book, literally. In 2010, she published her autobiography, 3,096 Days. This wasn't just a book, it was a weapon. It was her definitive, exhaustive, and utterly harrowing account of her life. It was a way to bypass the media filter, to speak directly to the public, and to lay out the facts of her case so clearly and brutally that there would be no room left for speculation. And it is a tough read. She doesn't spare the details, the violence, the starvation, the mind games, the sheer soul-crushing monotony of her existence. But she also details her own resilience, her internal world, her strategies for survival. Writing the book was an act of supreme narrative control. She was taking the story that the media had turned into a circus and the theorists had turned into a conspiracy, and she was reclaiming it. Every word was a brick in the wall she was building around her own truth. The book was a massive international bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. It forced people to confront the reality of what she had endured, not the sensationalized version. It was her testimony, delivered not in a courtroom, but to the entire world. But writing a book and getting on with your life are two very different things. The psychological toll of her captivity was, and is, immense. Freedom, it turns out, is not a cure for trauma. In many ways, it's a trigger. In the cellar, her life was brutally simple: survive. In the outside world, she had to deal with the complex fallout. She has spoken about suffering from severe PTSD. For years, she couldn't sleep in a completely dark room. She had to have a light on, a habit born from the terror of Přiklopil controlling the switch, plunging her into darkness as punishment. She suffered from agoraphobia, a fear of open spaces. After being confined to a tiny room for so long, the vastness of the outside world, the sheer number of people, was overwhelming. A simple walk in a park could feel like a threat. And then there's the social anxiety. How do you make friends? How do you trust people, especially men? Her entire social development was arrested at age 10 and then warped by a single abusive relationship. Every new person she met, she had to wonder, what do they want from me? Do they see me, or do they see the headline? This is the invisible prison she still has to contend with every day. The cellar door is open, but the echoes of it remain in her mind. And what about the family that was shattered by her disappearance? That awkward reunion at the police station was just the prologue to a very complicated story. Reconnecting wasn't as simple as picking up where they'd left off. How could it be? Her parents had divorced, their lives had moved on in different directions, united only by their shared grief. Now, they had to get to know this adult stranger who was their daughter. The media, of course, made this intensely private process a public spectacle. Every family outing was scrutinized. Were they smiling enough? Did they look happy? Tabloids would pit her mother and father against each other, publishing competing interviews and fueling family drama for clicks. Her relationship with her mother, Brigitte, was particularly strained. Remember that fight on the morning of her abduction? That unresolved tension hung in the air for years, compounded by a decade of guilt and miscommunication. Her father, Ludwig, had spent his life savings trying to find her, a fact that created its own complicated dynamic of debt and expectation. They all loved each other, no doubt. But trauma changes people. She had changed, they had changed, and finding their way back to each other was a slow, painful process, made 1,000 times harder by the fact that they had to do it with the whole world watching. So you've got this fractured family dynamic playing out under a microscope, with tabloids basically live tweeting every awkward family dinner. It's a nightmare. But just when you think the public consumption of your trauma can't get any weirder, Hollywood calls. Of course they do. Because what's a harrowing tale of child abduction and decade-long survival, if not potential Oscar bait? The process began to turn her book, her life, 3,096 Days, into a feature film. Think about that for a second. You've just spent years trying to convince the world that what happened to you was real, and now you have to watch as it gets storyboarded, cast, and catered. Your deepest, most private hell is about to become someone else's popcorn movie. The film was a German production, and it aimed for a stark, unflinching realism. This wasn't going to be a feel-good, sanitized version of the story. They wanted to show the grit, the grime, the psychological horror. For Natascha, this was another bizarre exercise in letting go of control while trying to maintain some semblance of it. She was involved, but as a consultant on her own life story. Imagine having to explain to a director, no, the despair didn't look quite like that. It was a bit more hollow. It's a level of surreal detachment that most of us can't even comprehend. Her life was officially entering its meta phase, where the reality and the depiction of the reality were starting to blur in the most public way imaginable. The actress chosen to play her in the latter half of the film was Antonia Campbell Hughes, and she took the role seriously. Maybe too seriously. She went full method actor, losing a terrifying amount of weight to better portray the starved, malnourished Natascha. The on-set photos were shocking. She looked skeletal, haunted. She even, reportedly, suffered a torn Achilles tendon and a broken rib during the physically demanding shoot. And here's where it gets even more twisted. The media, of course, loved this. The actress suffering for her art to portray the victim who suffered in reality. It became part of the movie's marketing. So now, you have another woman's pain being used to sell the story of your pain. The film, released in 2013, is a brutal watch. It's claustrophobic and deeply unsettling. It did exactly what it set out to do. It showed the horror without flinching. But for Natascha, what must that have been like? To sit in a dark theater and watch an actress who has starved herself to look like you, acting out the worst moments of your life, while an audience munches on popcorn. It's the ultimate commodification of suffering. The movie did, in some ways, help to silence the critics by presenting such a raw, undeniable version of events. But it also cemented her identity as that girl from the movie, forever linking her public persona to this grim, cinematic depiction of her past. After having her story told through police reports, news articles, a book, and a movie, Natascha decided to do something completely unexpected. She decided to be the one holding the microphone. In 2008, for a brief period, she hosted her own talk show on an Austrian TV channel. The show was called Natascha Kampusch trifft, which translates to Natascha Kampusch meets. The audacity of this move is just spectacular. Think about the power shift. For years, she was the subject, the silent object of intense scrutiny and endless questions. Now, she's in the host chair, controlling the conversation, asking the questions. Her guests ranged from other media personalities to people who had survived their own unique circumstances. It was her attempt to understand the world she had been ripped from, and to use her unique platform to have conversations that maybe no one else could. Of course, the public reaction was mixed. To some, it was an incredibly brave and empowering act of self-determination. To others, it was unseemly. A victim of a horrific crime shouldn't be a TV personality, right? It didn't fit the script. The show didn't last long, just a handful of episodes. But it was a fascinating chapter. It was a statement that she would not be defined solely by her past. She was a person with curiosity, intelligence, and a desire to engage with the world, not just hide from it. She was trying on a new identity, one that wasn't victim or survivor, but simply host. Beyond her public forays into media, she was also quietly trying to create something positive from the financial windfall that came with her tragedy. Let's be clear, nobody wants to get rich this way. The money she earned from her book and interview deals was blood money, earned through years of suffering. But she was determined to use it for good. She established her own charitable foundation, the Natascha Kampusch Foundation, and donated a significant portion of her earnings to help other victims of crime and people in need. It was a way of taking this money, tainted by its origins, and laundering it into something pure. She didn't just write checks either. She got involved. She worked with animal shelters. She supported a hospital in Sri Lanka. It was a quiet, determined effort to create meaning out of a meaningless act of violence. This is a part of her story that often gets overlooked in the sensationalism and the conspiracy theories. It's the part where she actively tries to make the world a slightly better place, using the very trauma that almost destroyed her as a catalyst for compassion. It shows a depth of character that her critics, so eager to paint her as cold or calculating, conveniently ignored. She was transforming her pain into a purpose, one charitable act at a time. Then, in 2016, 10 years after her escape, she did it again. She wrote another book. This one was called 10 Years of Freedom, A Life in the Public Eye. And if the first book was about the captivity, this one was all about the bizarre, difficult, and often cruel reality of what came next. This was her answer to the haters, her direct rebuttal to the conspiracy theorists, the media critics, and the public that demanded she perform her victimhood in a certain way. She laid it all bare: the cyberbullying, the stalking, the constant feeling of being watched and judged, the struggle to have normal relationships, the profound loneliness of being the world's most famous kidnapped victim. The title itself is a piece of beautiful, painful irony. 10 Years of Freedom. But what is freedom when you can't walk down the street without being recognized? What is freedom when your trauma is public property? The book is a powerful manifesto on the aftermath of survival. It makes the crucial point that escaping is not the end of the story. For many survivors, it's the beginning of a different kind of struggle. She was, once again, taking control of the narrative, refusing to let the world write the final chapter for her. The book was her way of saying, "You think you know my story? You only know the first half? Now, let me tell you about the part that's even harder to survive. The so-called freedom." So where does that leave us? You've written the books. You've sat through the movie premiere of your own life. You've even hosted a talk show. The world has consumed your story in every possible format. And yet, after all that, there's still the small matter of the house, the actual physical place where it all happened. Heinestrasse 60. You own it. Let that sink in. You own the prison where you were held captive for 3,096 days. It's the world's most horrifying piece of real estate, and the deed has your name on it. This isn't just a house, it's a monument to your trauma, and you're the one who has to pay the property taxes. The decision to keep it was a power move, a way to prevent it from becoming a ghoulish tourist trap. But it's also an anchor, a constant physical reminder. You can't just sell it and walk away. Who would buy it, and what would they do with it? So you maintain it, you visit it. You've described it as a treasure chest of your stolen youth, a place filled with the objects of your captivity. It's this bizarre, complicated relationship. You are the curator of your own prison museum, a place no one else is allowed to enter. It's a financial burden and an emotional black hole, a piece of your past that you can't escape because you literally own it. It stands there in that quiet suburban street, a testament not just to his evil, but to your survival and your strange, ongoing duty to the past. And then there's the other ghost you can't sell or tear down: the memory of Wolfgang Přiklopil. For years, the public and the press have been obsessed with your feelings about him. Remember that initial interview? when you didn't just paint him as a drooling, one-dimensional monster, but as a complex, pathetic, and deeply disturbed human being? The world couldn't handle that. They wanted pure hatred, righteous fury. They didn't want nuance, your attempts to explain the psychological phenomenon of traumatic bonding, the way a victim can develop a complex dependency on their abuser as a survival mechanism, were twisted into accusations of sympathy. "She mourns her captor," the headline screamed, but it was never about mourning him. It was about acknowledging the bizarre reality of your situation. For 8.5 years, he was the only person on your planet. He was the source of all your pain, but also the person who brought you food. He was your tormentor and your teacher, your jailer and your only human contact. When he died, that entire twisted universe collapsed. The grief wasn't for the man. It was for the end of a world, however horrific, that you had learned to navigate. It was for the loss of the only relationship you had. It's a psychological paradox that is almost impossible for anyone on the outside to understand. And you've spent more than a decade trying to explain that it's not sympathy for the monster, but a deep, complicated understanding of the cage he built, both literally and psychologically. So how do you fight the ghosts? How do you build a new identity when the world is determined to keep you shackled to your old one? You create. You build. You make things. It's a quiet rebellion, but it's a powerful one. Natascha has, over the years, thrown herself into creative pursuits. She took up photography, learning to frame the world through her own lens, to be the one capturing the image instead of the one being captured. It's a beautiful reversal of power. For years, her image was stolen by paparazzi with telephoto lenses. Now, she's the one deciding what's in focus. She also started designing her own line of jewelry. Think about that. She's creating small, beautiful, precious things. Things that are designed to bring joy and adornment. It's the polar opposite of the ugly, brutal functionality of the cellar. Each piece is a small act of defiance against the ugliness she endured. These aren't just hobbies. They're therapeutic acts of self-reclamation. Every photo she takes, every piece of jewelry she designs, is a statement that says, "I am more than what was done to me. I am a creator, not just a survivor." It's her way of adding new layers to her identity, layers that she has chosen, that she has made with her own hands, until the victim label is just one small part of a much more complex and interesting whole. But no matter how many books she writes or how much jewelry she designs, there's a beast that never sleeps: the internet conspiracy machine. Years after her escape, after multiple police investigations confirmed every detail of her story, the dark corners of the web are still churning out alternative theories. They are persistent, vile, and utterly detached from reality. There are forums dedicated to proving there was a second abductor. There are YouTube videos analyzing her body language and interviews for clues that she's lying. There are people who still believe her mother was involved, or that it was all part of a larger, shadowy network. It's a modern-day witch hunt fueled by anonymity and a deep-seated societal refusal to accept a simple, ugly truth: that one pathetic, meticulous man could get away with such a monstrous crime for so long. For Natascha, this is a permanent feature of her freedom. She has to live with the knowledge that there is a faction of the world that will forever see her, not as a survivor to be admired, but as a liar to be exposed. It's a constant, low-level psychological assault. She has learned to ignore it, for the most part. She has to. Because you can't reason with people who have chosen fantasy over fact. You can't win an argument with an echo chamber. All you can do is live your life and let the zombies of the internet rot in their own forums. So, after everything, what does her life look like now? It's a question people always ask, hoping for a neat, tidy answer. Is she happy? Did she find love? Is she cured? But life after trauma isn't a movie with a happy ending. It's a process. It's messy. From what we can gather, she has carved out a life for herself that is deliberately, defiantly private. She lives in an apartment in Vienna. She has a small, tight-knit circle of trusted friends. She has her creative pursuits. She has her philanthropy. And she has her solitude. She has found a way to exist in the world, but largely on her own terms. She's not the broken girl from the cellar, but she's also not the celebrity from the talk shows. She is a private citizen who happens to have one of the most public pasts imaginable. She has found a fragile peace, not by forgetting what happened, but by integrating it, by owning it, and by refusing to let it be the only thing that defines her. It's not a fairy tale ending. It's a testament to human resilience. It's the story of a woman who was subjected to the worst of humanity and somehow, painstakingly, piece by piece, managed to build a life of her own in the aftermath. So let's zoom out for a second, because the story of what happened after. The escape is, in many ways, just as disturbing as what happened during. It holds up a really grimy, unflattering mirror to the rest of us. Why was there such a backlash against her? Why did so many people refuse to believe her, or worse, get angry at her for not behaving the way they expected? The uncomfortable answer is that we, the public, have a pre-written script for victims. It's the perfect victim narrative, and Natascha refused to read her lines. In this script, the perfect victim is supposed to be broken, weeping, and endlessly grateful for her rescue. She should be simple, pure, and easy to pity. She should hate her captor with a fiery, uncomplicated passion. She is, essentially, a damsel in distress waiting for us, the public, to collectively rescue and then comfort her. But Natascha walked out of that cellar as a fully formed, complex, and intelligent human being. She was analytical. She was guarded. She spoke about her captor with a chilling psychological nuance that people mistook for sympathy. She didn't perform her trauma for the cameras. She owned it, and that made people profoundly uncomfortable. She wasn't a simple character in a fairy tale. She was a real, complicated person who had survived by being smarter and tougher than her captor. By refusing to be the perfect victim, she exposed the flimsy, self-serving nature of our pity. We didn't want a real person. We wanted a symbol. And when she refused to be one, a part of the public turned on her for ruining their story. This public trial was happening in parallel with a much more official one. The slow, grinding investigation into how the hell this was allowed to happen in the first place. Because let's be crystal clear, the system failed her. Utterly. The police had Wolfgang Přiklopil's name, they had his address. They even interviewed him in the early days of the investigation. Remember the witness, that 12-year-old girl who saw Natascha being bundled into a white van? Police followed up on hundreds of white vans, including Přiklopil's. He gave a flimsy alibi about hauling construction debris, and they just bought it. They looked at the monster, and all they saw was a slightly weird, nerdy guy. They didn't search the house. They didn't press him. They just checked a box and moved on. The multiple inquiries that followed her escape revealed a pattern of incompetence, of leads not followed, of different police departments not talking to each other. There were even accusations of corruption and cover-ups, though none were ever definitively proven. What is proven is that they were close. So close. For 8.5 years, Natascha was in that cellar, while a police file with her captor's name on it sat in a cabinet, gathering dust. The legacy of her case isn't just about the evil of one man, it's about the institutional blindness that allowed him to flourish. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest ally a monster has is bureaucracy. So, what's the lasting impact? What is the legacy of the Natascha Kampusch story? Well, for one, it completely changed the true crime landscape. It became a global touchstone, a new benchmark for horror and survival. But it also highlighted our insatiable and often ghoulish appetite for these stories. The media coverage was a masterclass in how not to handle a trauma survivor. The speculation, the invasion of privacy, the pressure, it set a precedent, but not necessarily a good one. You also have to consider the Kampusch effect on law enforcement and public awareness. For a time, it certainly made everyone more vigilant. Any report of a missing child in Austria was treated with a new level of seriousness. But does that kind of hypervigilance last? Or does it fade over time until the next horrific case snaps us back to attention? The story also forced a conversation about the psychology of captivity. Words like Stockholm Syndrome and traumatic bonding entered the popular lexicon, even if they were often misunderstood and misapplied. Her articulate self-analysis forced people to think about survival in more complex terms. She didn't just physically survive, she mentally outmaneuvered her captor. Her legacy, then, is a complicated one. It's a cautionary tale about monsters hiding in plain sight, about institutional failure, and about our own complicated role as consumers of tragedy. She didn't just give us a story, she gave us a mirror, and most of us didn't like what we saw. This brings us to the biggest, most philosophical question of all. What is freedom? Her second book, 10 Years of Freedom, really dives into this, and it's a gut punch. Because she makes it clear that for her, freedom isn't a destination she arrived at on August 23, 2006. It's a constant, ongoing negotiation. Is it freedom when you have to meticulously plan your trips to the grocery store to avoid being harassed? Is it freedom when every potential romantic partner has to be vetted against the possibility that they are just a ghoul, fascinated by your past? Is it freedom when your name is forever synonymous with the worst thing that ever happened to you? She escaped the physical cellar, but she entered a new prison, one made of public expectation, memory, and fame. A prison with invisible walls, but walls nonetheless. The truth is, you can never be truly free from a trauma that profound. It becomes a part of your cellular makeup. It's a ghost that follows you, a shadow that falls over even the sunniest days. Her story teaches us that freedom isn't just the absence of chains. It's the ability to define yourself, to control your own narrative, to be seen as a person instead of a story. And for her, that has been a fight every single day since she ran out of that garden. Ultimately, the story of Natascha Kampusch is a story of two escapes. The first was the physical one, that desperate, heart-pounding run through the gardens of Strasshof. It was an act of incredible bravery and opportunism. But the second escape is the one she's been engaged in ever since. It's the escape from the identity of victim. It's the escape from the public's projections and the media's narrative. It's the escape from the long shadow of her own past. This second escape is quieter, less cinematic, but in many ways, it's even more difficult. It requires a different kind of resilience, not the resilience to endure pain and starvation, but the resilience to endure judgment, to build a life in the glare of the public eye, to find joy and meaning after the unimaginable. She has done this by taking control, by writing her books, by pursuing her art, by owning her house, by refusing to perform for anyone. She has shown us that survival isn't a single event, it's a lifelong process. And in a world that loves to put survivors in neat little boxes, Natascha Kampusch has defiantly refused to be boxed in. She's not just the girl who was in the cellar. She's the woman who designed her own way out of the prison the world built for her afterwards. So, when we look at the full picture, what is the final takeaway? It's that the human spirit is this incredibly tough, grisly, and stubborn thing. But it's not invincible. Surviving something like this doesn't turn you into a superhero. It leaves scars. Deep ones. Not just the physical ones, but the deep, invisible fissures in your psyche. Natascha has spoken about this with incredible honesty. The years of abuse and malnutrition took a physical toll, leading to ongoing health issues. The psychological damage is a life sentence of its own. Every day is a negotiation with her own past. There are good days, and there are days when the shadow of the cellar feels a little longer, a little colder. She has to live with the fact that a huge portion of her formative years, the time when we're supposed to be learning who we are, was stolen and replaced with a twisted curriculum written by a monster. You don't just get over that, you learn to carry it. You learn to build a life around the crater it left behind. Her story isn't a simple triumph of good over evil. It's a much more complex and honest story about the enduring, messy, and often painful reality of what it means to carry on after the unthinkable. It's about finding a way to live, not in spite of the scars, but with them.
One of the strangest aspects of her re-entry into the world is the technological leap she had to make. Think about it. When she was taken in 1998, the internet was a niche thing you accessed through a screeching dial-up modem. Mobile phones were the size of bricks and mostly just made calls. Social media didn't exist. She re-emerged in 2006 into a world that was on the cusp of the smartphone revolution, a world of instant global communication and permanent online identities. She had to learn not just how to use a computer, but how to navigate a culture that had become inextricably linked with the web. And what a trial by fire that was. She learned about the internet and social media at the same time she became one of its most talked about subjects. She had to see the conspiracy theories, the hateful comments, the vile speculation about her firsthand. It's like learning to swim by being thrown into a shark tank. This digital world, which the rest of us grew into gradually, was an alien landscape to her, and a hostile one at that. Her ability to master it, to use it for her own books and projects, and to endure its darkest corners is just another testament to her incredible adaptability. She didn't just learn to live in the 21st century, she had to survive it all over again, online. Let's talk about justice, because in this story, it's a slippery, unsatisfying concept. The perpetrator is dead. There was no trial, no conviction, no day in court where he was forced to face what he did. There was no judge handing down a sentence, no moment of societal reckoning. He took that away from her, his final act of control. So, where does she find justice? It's not something the legal system can give her. She has had to forge it for herself. And it seems her version of justice isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about truth. It's about reclaiming the narrative. Every time she tells her story on her own terms, in her books or her interviews, that is an act of justice. Every time she corrects a misconception, every time she refuses to fit into the box the public builds for her, that is an act of justice. Owning the house is an act of justice. Using the money she earned from her trauma to help others is an act of justice. Her justice is quieter and more profound than a prison sentence. It's the ongoing daily act of living well, of creating, of thinking, and of ensuring that the truth of what happened to her, in all its complexity, is the version that endures. She couldn't have her day in court, so she has made the world her courtroom, and her life is her testimony. The story of Natascha Kampusch is fundamentally a story about control. For 3,096 days, one man had absolute control over every aspect of her existence. Her food, her light, her space, her knowledge. His entire world was built on this foundation of total domination. Her escape was the moment that control shattered. But the theme didn't end there. In the years since, her life has been a constant battle to seize control back. Control over her own story from the media. Control over her image from the paparazzi. Control over her past by owning the house. Control over her mind by refusing to be the perfect victim. Control over her future by pursuing her own passions. She learned about power from the most brutal teacher imaginable, and she has used that knowledge to navigate the treacherous waters of her freedom. She understands, in a way few people ever will, that true freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It's the power to choose your own. It's the ability to say no. No, I won't cry for your cameras. No, I won't simplify my story for your comfort. No, you cannot have this piece of me. Every one of those no's is a brick in the fortress of her new life, a fortress she designed herself.
And so, the story doesn't really end. It continues. Natascha Kampusch is in her 30s now. She is still living, still creating, still navigating the strange legacy of her own survival. She is a permanent fixture in the cultural landscape, a name that everyone knows, yet a person who fiercely guards her own privacy. She is a paradox, a public figure who craves a private life, a survivor who refuses to be defined by her survival, a woman who had her childhood stolen and is now spending her adulthood painstakingly building a new one from the ground up. Her story is a testament to the fact that some wounds never fully heal, but that life can, and does, grow around them. She didn't get a fairy tale ending because life isn't a fairy tale. She got something much more real and much more impressive. A life that is hers, that she fought for, that she escaped for, and that she defines on her own terms every single day.